Hey, Firebrand X here with a video public service announcement on why it's important to have proper shielding in your RGB Scart cables or your component video cables. As some of you may know, I had been making these SSDS3 audio amp bypass board, which gets rid of the ARM access noise from the SD card. And it also attenuates the volume such that you don't have to worry about lowering the CD volume in the menu from 100. You can just leave it at 100, and it's supposed to work great. It sounds great. There's no noise. But as I began selling these, every now and then I'd get a complaint email come in and saying that it's not working that great on their system. Some people said, well, it's sort of working, but I can still hear buzzing. And a couple other people were like, well, it's not really working at all. I'm hearing terrible buzzing. And so I was able to convince one of those people to send in their SSDS3 with the mod board and the RGB SCART cable they were using. So when I got it in, I looked at their mod work, and it was passable. The continuity was fine, checked out, but the tips weren't tinned, and so there was a lot of frayed ends that were very close to shorting to pads they shouldn't be, and I was really worried about that. So as you can see from this picture, I completely reworked the entire installation with new wires, with tinned ends, and plenty of flux to make sure the welds were nice and flowed properly. And so you can see this is a nice job here. I pat myself on the back anyway. But that wasn't the problem. The problem actually was their RGB SCART cable, and when I pulled it out of the box they sent, immediately I started suspecting, well, here we go, this is the problem, because it was this really thin, flimsy RGB cable, and I got to thinking, there's no way this has shielding in it. And so let me show you what I actually found when I opened up the SCART head itself. And bam, here's your early, Halloween scare here. There's no shielding whatsoever on each of the lines, and even the caps and resistors, they didn't bother to heat shrink or heat tube, or what do you call it? Shrink tube. Yeah, shrink tube the resistors or the caps here to properly insulate them, at least to keep them from shorting against each other, because that could happen. There's literally nothing that has been done to protect anything in this cable. And so because of that, all those different lines, the audio lines, the video lines, the power lines, they're all just commingled together in this SCART cable. And they're just going to couple over and cause this horrendous noise. And it sounds just as bad, if not worse, than the original noise that plagued early SSDS3 boards, where it was the ARM access causing, feedback noise into the op amp, which, as some of you may know, it was because they were missing a 10 microfarad capacitor on the voltage reference circuit for the op amp. All that technical jargon aside, here is pretty much the opposite end of the spectrum. This is Retro Access's coaxial upgraded cabling that they use in their SCART cables. And you can see here each of the different RGB and audio left and right lines are all fully shielded. They use PE insulation in addition to braided wire wrapped around each signal, and then that's then again covered in more shielding. So they just went the full 9 yards on this one. And so when I get RGB SCART cables, this is what I prefer to use. Granted, they're expensive, but if you're going to pay $300 for an SSDS3, and then maybe you're going to pay another $50 for an audio bypass board, and another $20 or $30 for an RGB bypass board, why not spend the $40 or $50 for a super upgraded cable like this and never have to worry about noise coupling over into the individual lines. So that's always been my way of thinking. I just don't understand why you would spend all that money on those devices and then buy, like these cheap $10 cables off of eBay, and then you end up having a miserable experience and you don't know why your experience is so bad. And so you send the modder in a panic, the guy who designs the boards and the installation method. It sent me into a panic, and I took down my store because I thought, oh my God, I'm selling defective merchandise. My mod board isn't working for some people, and there's clearly something I missed. Well, it turns out what I missed was out of my hands. It was the RGB cable. So, with that said, I'm going to mute my microphone and play for you that original picture SSDS3 with my mod board in it, as you saw in that picture, with the RGB cables they were using. That Halloween scare I showed you. Now prepare for your ears to get a Halloween scare. So here we go. Alright, so as you can hear, that was pretty frickin' awful. And keep in mind, all of that buzzing sound you heard, that was not the ARM chip or the SD card. The original flaw that was with the original SSD S3 boards before they fixed it with the 10 UF or 10 microfarad cap. Um, that was all video noise coupling into the audio lines in the RGB SCART cable itself. And so now I'm going to prove that theory by playing with the exact same equipment and same recording equipment, same SSD S3, same mod board. It's the exact same everything, except instead of that shitty RGB SCART cable, I'm now going to show you a demo using HD Retrovision's component cables, because they use proper shielding in their audio lines, probably their video lines too. I haven't actually cut the thing open to find out, but at the very least, I know their audio is fully shielded and it sounds fantastic. But don't take my word for it. Here we go with HD Retrovision component cables. Now, as you can tell, there's no noise. What little noise there is isn't from the cable. It's actually, if you were to analyze the audio from this YouTube video, you could bring the volume up and hear a little bit of noise in the background, but that's actually coming from the console's analog circuitry, and that really can't be fixed. But as you can tell, it's perfectly within tolerance levels. It actually sounds fantastic. And when you're playing on a TV or with your stereo blazing, it's going to sound great. You're not going to notice anything. And that's the way it should be with my audio bypass board. No ARM access and no crosstalk or coupling from your video lines, and that's the way it should be. So like I say, if you're going to spend, hundreds of dollars on getting these devices, these optical drive emulators, or you buy an RGB bypass board, and you pay a modder to install it, or even if you install it yourself, or you get an audio bypass board, do yourself a favor, do the people who design those boards a favor, and get good quality shielded cables. With that said, maybe you don't know who to buy from, who makes good cables. So I'm going to show you this picture here of some recommended companies that I personally vouch for myself, because I've tested their cables in most cases on multiple different systems. So you have in the upper left HD Retrovision. That's if you want component cables. They are by far the best ones you can buy on the market. I absolutely love them in a pinch whenever I need to grab a console and test something, to prove somebody wrong on the internet, because I love to try and do that. I always grab their cables because I can plug them in immediately and plug the left and right audio directly into my recording device and just go from there and see, all right, what's going on, that kind of thing. I believe they're in a transitional period right now. Their store should be soon back online with new stock. I know they have, I believe, a Canadian outlet that also is selling their cables. They may already have them in stock. If not, they're up for pre-order or something like that. But that's who you want to go with for component video. For Scart in the upper right is Retro Access. I use them for a couple of reasons for Scart. One, as you saw earlier, their coaxial upgraded cables are like, the cream of the crop. You can't get any better than that. Every line is multiply shielded, to absurd levels, and I love it. My OCD just loves that. And another reason I like them is I can talk to their maker and have her do a custom design to the cable. Say, I want it this long. I'd like the wiring to be assigned to these pins. I don't want this hooked up. And she's more than willing to do it, and I pay a premium price for the cables, and I couldn't be happier, So that's who I go with for RGB Scart. New to the market here, though, is Insurrection cables in the lower left-hand corner. You can see there. And I don't believe they insulate the video lines, but the good news is their audio lines are insulated, and that's the most important, because if your audio lines aren't insulated, you're going to get that noise that you heard in that horrible bad demo we played earlier. I have tested Insurrection cables on my setup and heard no noise in the audio lines whatsoever, so they come just as highly recommended for audio. And in the lower right hand corner is Retrogaming cables, and they are based in the UK, I believe, and I specifically recommend getting their Pack-a-Punch Pro cables. And that's their version of, coaxial upgrading, where they make sure each individual line is shielded and braided with, braided wire around it, to act as extra, protection, if you will. So if you're going to buy those cables, always try to get the Pack-a-Punch Pro versions. I know oftentimes they're sold out. Many of these guys, sometimes they're sold out, but you got to keep trying, because you don't want to get crap cables, because as you saw, bad things can happen. So I hope this video has been helpful, and many thanks to these 4 manufacturers for their cables. There's something for everyone from each of these companies, and so they come highly recommended from me anyway. And I thank you so much for watching, and the video links will be in the description below for each of these companies. Alright, catch you later. Bye.